Hello everybody and welcome to another hobby cheating video, and this one's going to be a little different because today we're not going to talk about a technique, we're not going to talk about a miniature or anything in particular regarding a specific way to apply paint to something or convert something or anything like that. Instead, if you clicked on this, you know what we're talking about is paint bravely, which is two simple words that means so much. I will openly admit I stole this from Matt DiPietro, who's the first person I heard it from, but it's something I certainly had lived by long before I heard him use this exact phrase, but it's so perfect and so succinct and so simple. And every great painter that I have met, that I have spoken to, that I've had the pleasure of learning from, has a similar outlook. That the only useless thing you can have in miniature painting is fear. Because only when you begin to paint bravely will you truly create something, make something artistic, push yourself to the next limit, take the next step on your own hobby journey, whatever it happens to be. So I'm going to talk through in this video why I think you should paint bravely and try to answer some of the common things I hear. Because what I often see when I read posts on Facebook or other places is I see, I'm afraid to do ... insert thing here. I am where I am and I'm afraid to go farther. And that it mystifies me because there is nothing to be afraid of. It's true that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, especially when it comes to miniature painting. So for the next couple minutes, we're going to talk about painting bravely, and I happen to have a miniature on here that I painted that I thought he looked very brave. So he was what I picked to be the video for this. He himself is an experiment in doing a whole bunch of different things bravely. Like, that's the first time I did those wings in that color of, like, choosing to do gold wings and stuff like that. But that's not what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about specific critiques to being brave, to taking the next step. So let's do it. The first thing that I often hear when people say this is, well, I don't know how to do this, so I don't want to do it. Right? I'm afraid because I don't know. You're afraid because you don't know the technique. You don't know how to do it. The first person who made fire probably didn't know how to make fire. The first person to do everything didn't know how to do anything. You don't have to be the first person to do anything in miniature painting, likely, because somebody has done it first. And if, as long as you're curious, be curious, you will defeat fear. A wonderful quote from James Stevens: "Curiosity will conquer fear even more than bravery will." I couldn't agree more. The wealth of resources available to you in the modern world is so far beyond where it was 20 years ago when I started painting. If there's a question you have about a technique, about a color, about a combination, about a miniature, about anything, you're a Google search and a YouTube tutorial or 10 away. The reason I have this miniature up here is because when I wanted to do this diorama, I knew I wanted to do marble. And I'd never been happy with any of my experiments with marble before. So I Googled it. Painting marble. And of course there was a bunch of miniature painting videos, but then I also noticed that there was some videos about people who paint faux marble for countertops. Like, full-size countertops. How they take other stuff that isn't marble and make it look like marble. And I watched that. And I realized what they were doing was totally applicable. I could do the same thing with acrylic paints. And I tested it out a few times and got it to where I liked it and created this. And it's one of the things I'm most proud of because I've never seen anybody else paint marble in exactly this way. Not that that makes it special in any way. It doesn't. But I was happy that I managed to integrate a lesson and something from a completely different world in there. Again, I didn't think of that on my own. I just synthesized other knowledge that other people had that they learned from somebody else and so on. I was curious, and I searched, and I found. So be curious. If your fear is stemming from a lack of knowledge, there is no excuse. The world is full of knowledge. If you're watching this, you have the internet. You have the sum total of all human knowledge at your fingertips. You can click away from this video and learn about anything and everything that any human being has ever learned, ever. That's pretty good. So, be curious, and you'll lose fear. That's my first thing. The next thing I often hear people say is they're afraid because they don't know if they can do it. Just sort of a general malaise about it, I suppose. And my question is, what are you afraid of? What is it? General fear, I'm afraid to do this. Why? Wonderful quote from Marcus Aurelius. I won't read it out, but one of my favorite Stoics and Roman emperors. And the entire point of the quote is that fear only lives in you, no one else. You have the power to change it, to get rid of it at any moment. So figure out what you're afraid of and why you're afraid of it, why you don't want to do the next thing, whatever that thing is, and just do it. Get rid of it. Revoke that fear's right. I know that sounds easy to say and hard to do, and it is. I mean, I understand what I'm saying is difficult, okay? But you, in the end, have the power, not anybody else. I'm not trying to get all Tony Robbins inspirational speaker on you. I just mean that it's true. This is miniature painting. You're not negotiating the START treaty, okay? This is simply putting some acrylic paint, mixing it with water, getting it on a brush, and applying it to a piece of plastic. That's it. There's no rocket science. Nobody dies if you screw up. Right? Your life doesn't change or get ruined if you fail. But your life could be vastly enriched if you succeed. So there is zero risk and a huge windfall of potential success. Why wouldn't you try it? Why wouldn't you try whatever you're thinking? The reason I have this miniature up here is this is something I painted last year, which was an inspiration from, obviously, the Sisters of Battle cover from back in the 90s by John Blanche, one of my favorite artists of all time. And when this miniature came out, I thought, well, it's dead. Obviously, it was made to mimic the cover. So I thought, why not recreate the cover, but with the miniature? I didn't know I could do that. And to be completely honest, I had never painted like a background scene of that level of complexity and craziness with all those characters. He just fits. His art is so dense. It's crazy. But I said, let's give it a shot. And I just kept looking at the painting and kept painting what I saw. And again, I didn't have to do the hard part, which was actually think of this gorgeous piece of art. John did all the hard work when he created this stunning piece of art originally. Not my miniature, the art it's based on. I just had to try to interpret his work as best as I could and live up to the bar that he set. Right? There's nothing to be afraid of. In the end, you might fail, you might succeed, but it doesn't matter. Because you can only gain. Whether in failure or success, you will come out in the positive. That's it. So, if once you realize that, there's no reason not to try it, and there's no reason to be afraid. Failure is your first step to not sucking. This is the most important lesson, I think. Dale Carnegie's quote of inaction breeds doubt and fear, but action breeds confidence and courage. Not doing a thing isn't going to make you any better at a thing. Pretty simple. If you just decide not to do it because you're afraid of doing it, guess what? You will always suck at that thing. You're not going to magically wake up tomorrow better at that thing. That doesn't happen. Okay? So, you can either try it now and maybe screw it up, which, as I said in the previous slide, has no risk. Or, you can not do it, definitely not get any better, or not take your step, or not achieve what you wanted to, or whatever your goals happen to be. Okay? And be in the same place again tomorrow. You can either take a step or not, but only one Makes you go forward. That's it. Now, the reason I have these miniatures here is because these are some Furies that I converted for my Slaanesh army. They were one of my early conversions when I came back to my Slaanesh army. These are several years old now. And I look at them and I hate them now. But that's okay. It doesn't matter. They were, chop-ups of a lot of kits. I hadn't really done many conversions. And I hadn't really done that many flying minis. And I didn't like flying sticks, and I wanted them all at different levels. And so I did a bunch of things. Some of this worked, and some of it didn't. I thought the wings came out okay as the replacement for their arms. Paint scheme's okay. The giant metal gray poles going up, holding them looked terrible. But things were tried. There were successes and failures. I learned a lot. And I would go on to do a lot of different flying miniature conversions, some of which using inspiration from ways I screwed this up. Okay? So let's look at a more recent Slaanesh miniature. This is something I painted more recently. This is probably, a few months ago. Okay? And I think that there is probably a fairly obvious advancement in technique there. I'll start with that. And that's not me like, oh, look at me. I'm not tooting my own horn, okay? I don't care. It is what it is. This miniature itself builds on all the lessons I learned from before. The way she's placed, the snow, the coloration, the contrast, the skin tone, the demonic dots, the sword, the wings, everything. Everything. It's the same color scheme, right? I just refined it and learned how I wanted it to work and what made what pop and what made what look right. It's the same silver, purple, magenta. It's the same colors. It's just a different palette, different creature. Still conversions. All right. So the goal of getting to something like this, which is what I had in my mind originally, of course, I couldn't have got here without taking those first steps and failing and sucking. Or maybe not even sucking. I don't know. Those girls are probably fine. They're just fine. But that's just it. Again, what's the worst that happens? You make something that's kind of sucky. Who cares? You still learn. You tried. You did. Now you know what's wrong. And you cannot do that the next time. You either take a step forward or you don't, like I said. Okay? So, there you go. Once you realize that you've got to take steps, and that again, even when you fail, you're actually advancing and learning, there's no reason to fear. There's only painting bravely. You cannot ruin things. So I saved this one for last, because this is the most important one. I bet many of you out there are probably already saying this in response to some of the things I've said. One of the last and most common things I hear is, I am afraid I will ruin it. That doesn't make sense to me. You cannot do that. That is not possible. It is not possible with acrylic paint to ruin a miniature. Bottom line. That is an impossibility. That is like saying, I don't want to go to the grocery store because I'm afraid I'll open a black hole that will destroy the entire world. There is no such possibility. That isn't a thing on your radar. That can't happen. I have this, I like this Patton quote a lot. The success is measured by how high you bounce when you hit bottom. And the reason I use that one is because in trying things, you will screw crap up. And I use this miniature on the side because I want to share a little story with you. This is obviously my Maw Crusher conversion, my Maw Chicken. I love this mini. This is probably one of my favorite conversions I've ever done. Maybe second to only my Archaon conversion. This is a pretty expensive miniature. I don't remember how much he is exactly, but he's certainly more than $100, and that's a lot of freaking money. Not to mention the $30 Lord of Change wings that I had to go out and buy separately, and every other bit and bob and piece. Right? So let's conservatively say there's $150 on the table with this guy. Well, I knew what I wanted to convert. I had him in my head. But I didn't have him exactly. I knew I kind of wanted him to be a chicken. So what did I do? I started hacking into him. I was still kind of planning and fitting, I got this guy all the way glued together, and he didn't have this head. This head you see here, the Lord of Change head or whatever. Not the head he had. He had a tiny little phoenix head, and it looked stupid. And I realized that afterward. Okay? Now, I had green stuffed and glued this piece on. I had done work to fit it. That's a place where you might think, boy, you can ruin something. I'm not even talking about painting. I had hacked off and destroyed plastic. I had applied green stuff. I had glued things with plastic glue. And then as I sat there looking at it, I walked away from it for the night, came back the next day. And as I often do with big conversions, because I want to let it you get kind of tucked into them, and it's good to step away for a minute. I came back and I said, that head looks dumb. He has a tiny little head. He has a little baby head. So I looked around, I found I think that's the Archaon, like Lord of Change head or whatever. Found that, sized that up, looked about right, and then I cut that other head off and just went to town. Now, he's got some extra skulls around his neck right now because I had to kind of hide and disguise some stuff I couldn't cover up very well where I had torn things. But that's just it. Even with cutters and an X-Acto knife and glue, I couldn't ruin a thing permanently. I mean, I'm sure if I just took a hammer to this guy, I could ruin him permanently. I'm not implying you cannot ruin miniatures. You certainly can. A sledgehammer would beg to disagree with me. But if I didn't ruin him with that, you're not going to ruin a miniature with paint. The miniature himself, and as he's painted, is a massive experiment in stuff. When I put the banner on his back, I said, I want to paint a rooster. I've never painted a rooster before. I want to paint a giant flaming rooster, because that's an in-joke to me that's very funny. And the Iron Jaws themselves, they're all battle damaged. And with freehand, like with battle damage on top of freehand on top of, fairly high contrast sort of armor. All of which itself was an experiment from the beginning. So I would take a bunch of time doing these very complex blends across the armor, and then start battle damaging it. Then put freehand over the top of it. Then battle damage all of that. So, hours of work on every single miniature. I then am putting like black and brown paint over top of and scratching it up. I'm making finger quotes, scratching it up. And I love it. It came out great. I mean, the first time I tried it, it didn't come out perfect. It took me time to refine it, right? The first time I applied battle damage, it was not great. And then I got better and did it more. But I can't ruin it. It's paint. You can paint over it. Right? That's all. You just paint over it. If you're using paint that's so thick that you can't paint over it because you'll obscure the detail, you can just strip it. Like purple power and simple green is a thing. People strip miniatures all the time. You can get paint off minis. It's pretty easy. But I don't even do that. If I mess up paint, I just paint over it. It's just paint. That's all. You can't ruin it. Now, you might say, well, that takes time, and I've already invested a lot of time. And that's what I'm worried about ruining. So it's not really I'm worried about ruining it in a way I can't fix. I'm worried about ruining it and then having to take a lot of time. Okay. I mean, sure, there is no magic recipe for time, and you should always be mindful of your time. I agree with that. But all that means is that you try it in a small area first, and then look. How high, I've seen this come up with things like cloaks. People spend a lot of time blending on cloaks. And then they say, I want to do some freehand on the cloak, but I'm afraid I'll ruin it. And what they really mean is I'm afraid I'll screw up the freehand. And then I won't be able to actually paint the cloak again. Well, first of all, you can always fix a thing easier than you can do a thing from scratch. You don't have to rebase layer. You're just applying shades and contrast and something that roughly matches. It's actually pretty fast and easy. But on a deeper level than that, just try a little bit of the freehand. Make sure you know what you want it to look like. Draw it out with a pencil first. Paint it on something else. Make sure you've got happening what you want to happen. And once you're confident, do it. If it's wrong, yeah, you might have to burn a little time. But chances are you can just go back with a tiny amount of your original color and fix your freehand. What's easier, repainting everything or correcting a tiny mistake? So whether we're talking about time or actually ruining it, there just is no such thing. So you might say, well, Vince, all of this is easy for you to say, right? Given wherever you are and whatever you've done. If I have any modicum of skill in painting or whatever. But the point is that, yeah, sure, that's true. I mean, it is easy for me to say, but it's not because of anything I've done or anything I've painted. It's just simply because I have painted as bravely as I think I could, as often as I could, and it's been fun, and I've discovered a lot of stuff. And the only real reason I wanted to record this was because I'm hoping that other people will too. I will say it's incredibly rewarding to try something new and fail, and then try it again and be pretty happy with it. But you got room to grow, and then try it one more time and feel like, whoa, I just did a cool thing. And if I can help other people get over that hump and try something new and push themselves or go to the next level or achieve something they want to achieve, then I feel like that's totally worth it. Because in the end, I assure you, I didn't start this journey with any amount of artistic skill. I don't have a bone in my body. If I had any advantage, it was just that I tried things constantly and wasn't afraid to mess up or waste time or any of the things I've mentioned thus far. So I want to thank you very much for watching. I hope this doesn't sound preachy. It's not intended that way. It's only encouraging. Please take it as such. So thank you. Lose the fear. Try something new. Try something fun. Try something crazy. But most importantly, paint bravely. Thank you very much for watching. Give it a like if you liked it. Subscribe for more hobby cheating. We'll get back to techniques next week, of course. And as always, we'll see you next time.